That's a lot of stuff you have to really deal with and get into the Bible. It's a lot of it, a lot of stuff you have to really, mold your mind around. But in this case, the key here is Tyrus or Tyre. So you have to understand it's the same place, talking about the same thing. As you can see here, this is what it basically looked like on the map. We're going to deal a lot with this place. There's a lot of history wrapped up in here. It's unbelievable. And we're going to get into it. Let's read. The Phoenician city of Tyre, a rich history of industry, mythology, and conflict. According to tradition, the city of Tyre was founded in 2750 BC and is considered one of the world's oldest metropolises. Think about that. For much of its history, Tyre has played an important role in the region. The Tyrians were master seafarers and explorers. By sailing around the Mediterranean, the Tyrians made contact with other civilizations and founded colonies. As a result, Tyre had a special place in a number of ancient Mediterranean communities. Greek mythology states Europa, for whom the continent of Europe was named, you see where we're going, was a Phoenician princess of Tyre who was abducted by Zeus in the form of a bull and brought to the island of Crete. On the island, Zeus revealed his identity, and Europa became the first queen of Crete. One of Europa's brothers was Cadmus, who, according to legend, brought the alphabet to mainland Greece. In addition, the Tyrians also founded colonies, the most famous of which is Rome's greatest rival, Carthage. It is believed that this city was founded by another Tyrian princess, Dido, who left Tyre to escape her evil husband. It is said that when she arrived in North Africa, she requested a small piece of land from the Berber king, Larbus, and subsequently founded Carthage. The story of Dido is most vividly portrayed in Virgil's Aeneid. So we're talking about Tyre or Tyrus, and you see how they do it. In the Bible, you got Tyrus, but it's really Tyre. Tyrus, Tyre, when you see one of the names, it's talking about the same place, a city in Phoenicia. Now, understand of course, Phoenicia is basically, modern day, today is Lebanon. But we understand this is where Europa comes from, which Europa gives us Europe. So again, you see where we are headed. We're talking about Europe. We're talking about the Europeans. Huge history going on here that we're going to get into. So, understand of course, this land, didn't belong to the Phoenicians. You got to understand what the Phoenicians is. This was clearly part of Egyptian territory when you understand the Egyptian kingdom. It was part of the Egyptian empire, that land for a long time. Don't let history fool you. We're going to get into this. But it was a part of Egyptian territory. Now, the name Phoenician was given to it, by the Greeks. The Greeks is the one who named it Phoenician, or, the Phoenicians. And it comes from the Greek word phonikos. So Phoenician comes from the Greek word phonikos, which means purple people. Phonikos, purple people. So this is where we get Phoenician. What are the purple people? They call them purple people. One, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, we get so black, we can look purple. That's not it. But Phonikos or Phoenician, that purple people thing, comes from the morax. The morax is basically a shellfish or like a sea slug kind of sort of. Basically, it emits this purple dye that is very strong. It doesn't just wash off or come off. So a lot of people, wanted to use it because it actually got stronger in the sun, So if you use that purple dye, it actually got stronger. So this is why they call them purple people, because the people who worked in there, getting these shells out in the water, of course, the dye would cover them up and it would be like purple, when they came out. So Phoenician comes from Phonikos, and the Greeks are the one who came up with that name. So now most people, when they think about the Phoenicians, when they think about that land, some people think about the Persians, think about Arabs, some people think about Europeans being there. A lot of people, when they think about the Phoenicians, don't take it back to black people. And this is one of the problems. There's a lot of debates when people start getting into ancient Phoenician. Who was the Phoenicians? Who was the Phoenicians? Was they black? Was they white? What have you? And you can understand why when you start going into that history, especially when you see the Greeks talk about in their mythology getting a language, which we'll get into that. But a lot of people don't, associate it with African people or black people. But the land was clearly Egyptian territory, plain and simple. You go there and you have the Temple of Obelisk and Byblos. Now, you go to Byblos, you have the Temple of Obelisk, still stand to this day. We're talking dating over, 1000 BCE. And the temple's still there. You can see it's all these obelisks, all these little, statues or what have you there, as well as other Egyptian artifacts and Egyptian sites there as one of the tourist attractions when you go there. Now, you start going back over, you can see, not too far away is Tyre, the city of Tyre. Not that far. You keep going over more, and guess what else you run into? You run into Israel. You keep going over, of course, more, and of course, Egypt. All of this was Egyptian territory, of course. They had all this land, all this space. There's going to be a lot of, things that you research and see that's going to try to fit biblical history within there. So you got to understand, one, Tyre was a huge city. You had Tyre, and you had Tyre, the mainland. And you had Tyre, you see that part that sticks out in the water. It was an island, unto itself for a while, for a long time. But you had, when the Greeks came in there, Alexander and his troops basically slaughtered everybody on the mainland, and they basically killed a bunch of people, and they enslaved whoever they could enslave. A lot of people bought their way out of the whole situation. Some people couldn't, but they basically, was recorded as them slaughtering so many people and completely destroying the city. I mean, decimating it. They came in with all kinds of, battering rams and stuff, and just basically laid the city to rubble. Then the people who, fled to the island. So you had the Phoenician people and the people who was there basically jump in their ships and go out to the island. A lot of people kept going, but the people who couldn't go anywhere else went to their home on the island. As you can see, it was, as I said, it was an island. So, for the next 7 months, Alexander and his troops went on killing and destroying, killing people, enslaving people, and destroying the city. But what they did was they used the rubble from the city to basically build a causeway from the mainland of Tyre to the island of Tyre. And in 7 months, they had that causeway built. And in 7 months, they went to that island and completely massacred about 30,000 people there. And the same situation occurred where some people bought their way out, some people couldn't, the rest got enslaved or got killed. So he finally did end up taking that island and killing a bunch of people. So you can see now how it looks. The causeway is there, but it wasn't there before, and it is attributed to Alexander. This is something that everybody knows. The Romans have a monument there to this day, pertaining to Alexander. This is history, people. This is recorded history, and it doesn't fit with the Bible. So it's funny how when we look at their book, this is how they try to hide, away from it and say that, oh well, of course they're not going to say they wrote the book. But this is how we can look at actual recorded history and see it doesn't fit with what the Bible's saying. But we can read the Bible and get the clues and see that this is where they stole their stories from and put them in the Bible. But real history says something different. So again, when we go to Ezekiel, and understand, take note that this stuff is all in Ezekiel. When we talked about before, about Satan and all that stuff in Ezekiel as well. So we read in Ezekiel 26, 3 through 6, it says, "Therefore thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I am against thee, O Tyrus," which Tyrus is Tyre, "and will cause many nations to come up against thee, as the sea causeth his waves to come up. And they shall destroy the walls of Tyrus and break down her towers. I will also scrape her dust from her and make her like the top of a rock. It should be a place for the spreading of nets in the midst of the sea, for I have spoken it, saith the Lord God. And it shall become a spoil of the nations, and her daughters which are in the field shall be slain by the sword, and they shall know that I am the Lord." So we know it's all bullshit. But this is how you prove that the Greeks are the ones who created the Bible. This is how you prove it. One, who else would know about this history? Now, I just told you about the story about how Tyre was laid siege by Alexander. But then you read in the Bible, in Ezekiel, them talking about, God, the Lord, basically sending nations against Tyre. And we know there was nations that basically came up against Tyre. I won't say many nations, it was basically two, the Persians and the Greeks. So, we know they came in, but who sent them? Was this God, from the Bible destroying Tyre? Or is it what we just read? And we know, I mean, you could basically say, yeah, it's God, because they are God. Plain and simple. All they done is talking about what they did. So we know that these people basically proclaim themselves as God. That's what's hidden in the book. So it's going to get even more deeper. We're going to decipher this thing real quick using the Bible and actual history. And it's easy. Because the thing is, one, a lot of people read this stuff and get confused. But as I said, when you know the Bible and you know real recorded history, it's easy to break down, as I'm doing right here. But again, let's go to Ezekiel again. Ezekiel 26:7 says, "For thus saith the Lord God, behold, I will bring upon Tyrus Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, a king of kings from the north, with horses and with chariots and with horsemen and companies and much people." There is no proof of a Nebuchadnezzar coming into Tyre and basically laying siege to the place. There's no proof. We're going to bust it up in a second to prove the point. Again, one, the only Nebuchadnezzar, because there's a bunch of them, the only Nebuchadnezzar that could have been close to the time that this happened with the destruction of Tyre, Tyrus, either one, the only Nebuchadnezzar that could have been there during that time was Nebuchadnezzar II. But he died in the 6th century BCE, which is long before the destruction of Tyre. So that's the only Nebuchadnezzar that can be even close to that time in actual history. So we know, no, it wasn't Nebuchadnezzar. So again, this is how you catch the Bible. Now, this is important. And the way that we prove this is, one, to go back to the Bible, to Ezekiel. Ezekiel 26:14. Remember, it says, "And I will make thee like the top of a rock. Thou shalt be a place to spread nets upon. Thou shalt be built no more." This is the so-called prophecy of Ezekiel. "Thou shalt be built no more. For I, the Lord, have spoken it, saith the Lord God." Now, the only time that Tyre was destroyed to where it was built no more began with Alexander. And we're talking about the 4th century BCE. Long after that Nebuchadnezzar that's close to this time frame, had died already. So we're talking the 4th century BCE. So that's important because ever since Alexander destroyed the place, you had the Romans coming later and basically take it from the Greeks, and they built on it, and then that got torn down by the Arabs. So this ruin that I showed you with the basically the temple of the obelisk or what have you is ruins. That whole area is a tourist attraction to this day. It's still in ruins. It's nothing built on there. You can see the remnants of Rome there, the remnants of Greece there, the remnants of the ancient Egyptians, but it has never been rebuilt, the city that was destroyed. So this is the so-called prophecy, which again, it's one of those prophecies where it's bullshit. What's to stop anybody from going there, the government from going there right now and rebuilding the place? Now, one, is a landmark, so they can't do it. So this is how you fulfill the prophecy. Oh, we're making a landmark, nobody can build there. But nothing ain't really stopping people from building except for humans, men. This ain't God or no angels stopping people from building. It's permits, laws, legal shit that can be fixed by humans. So it's not no real prophecy. So understand, again, this is how you fix that whole thing. This is how you figure that whole thing out. We know, one, it's not Nebuchadnezzar because he wasn't alive during that time. Two, the prophecy, its own prophecy in the Bible, only fits around the time when Alexander in real history actually destroyed the place. So again, all the Greeks had to do, because remember, the King James Version was written between 1604 and 1611. So all they had to do was basically, they know the history, they know what happened, was put this in the book. They understand recorded history is already documented by many people. All they had to do was put it in the book, distort it, and make it as if, it fits with biblical history. Because when you go back during that time, you can say, well, such a thing happened. I guess it's talking about them. No, this is actual history. So we know it's bullshit when it's talking about Nebuchadnezzar. Now, another one of the daggers that basically gives it away we can find in the Bible. Again, talking about Alexander. The only person this fits is Alexander. So when you read again in Ezekiel 26:12 says, "And they shall make a spoil of thy riches, and make a prey of thy merchandise, and they shall break down thy walls, and destroy thy pleasant houses." As I said, Alexander destroyed the houses. "And they shall lay thy stones, and thy timber, and thy dust, in the midst of the water. Okay, so who did that? We know it's talking clearly about Alexander and about how he tore down the cities. He took the rubble, he took the trees, took everything and built that causeway to get to the island. It's right there in the Bible. But does it talk about Alexander? No. It's trying to divert you away from actual history, because if you follow actual history, it'll lead you to the truth, of course.